Hello and welcome back to the Wisdom Factory. And again, we are doing conversations that matter after 2 months of conscious aging. But also in conscious aging, we were talking about something similar to today's topic, which is authentic dating. We were talking about how in the third act find a partner. And it will be very interesting to know a little bit more about how we can do that. And before I introduce our guest, I want to introduce again Martin, who is co-hosting with me today again. Martin Ucik.
Welcome, everyone.
From Istanbul, while I'm Heidi Hörnlein from Italy. Also, I'm not Italian. You probably will hear it on my accent.
And I'm not Turkish, so we'll hear on my accent.
Either. Are you? How do you say? Indigenous New Yorker, Marc Beneteau?
Am I indigenous USA? Yes, I'm actually sort of Canadian American, but I'm living currently in Washington D.C.
Oh, in Washington.
I'm likely to become nomadic in the next little while. So it's an exciting change of life coming for me.
So we are all sort of displaced a little bit from where we came from, but you are nearest to where you were. So good. So we want to talk about dating and authentic dating. First of all, how to find a partner. I mean, maybe as far as I've understood, we all three are in this situation now that we are sort of looking for somebody after having had other experiences, how to find them and how to do it authentically and not just someone. So we will talk about that. And Marco, maybe first of all, you introduce yourself a little bit about your background and then we go into the topic, okay?
Sure. So before we begin, I'm extremely nervous here. This is the first time I've been interviewed on a topic of sexuality. I have a couple books. This is sort of my first book. It's called As Lovers Do. It's probably reversed in the thing. And it's sort of like a love and sex manual for men that I self-published 3 years ago. And I can maybe go into more of my story later and how that book got created. And I also have another book on the topics of circling and authentic relating, it's called the Circling Authentic Relating Practice Guide. And this is actually free. You can actually get this for free on the web or for small donation. And
where do people get that on your website?
Just Google Circling Guide, circlingguide.com. You'll find it pretty easily. Yeah. So my background, I honestly don't know where to begin. I guess this will be, evolved as we go. And I do want to hear from you guys, as well. I've listened to some of your podcasts and I've enjoyed them very much. I listened to the Top Habib one as well. Let me just say I've been obsessed with women since I was a child, since I came to puberty. And I am quite sexual, and my sexuality doesn't really seem to be fading with age, which is another phenomenon that is quite interesting. To make a long story short, I came across the authentic relating movement in fall of 2016 after a lifetime of developmental work. All right, psychotherapy, large group awareness training, new religious movements, churches, community building. You name it, I've done it, right? And I was literally blown away by the power of what's possible when people start to relate authentically, and we'll go into a little bit that later what that actually means to relate authentically. Like in terms of creating what's called the we space. So I look at the authentic relating movement and the circling practice as instantiations or practical ways of getting what's called we space. But we space, I think, is a larger movement. That includes Patricia Albear, the evolutionary collective movement. There's a lot of people that are doing stuff in that space, right? And I'm curious what you guys experience of that as well, is in terms of the we space movement. But I'm finding the practices of the authentic relating and circling movement to be profoundly applicable to sexuality. So, sexuality it's one of the deepest human needs, and it's the one area where we're all, to a greater or lesser degree, messed up. All right, so it's honestly it's the greatest challenge. I call it the greatest pain point of the Western world, right? Because it's basically overlaid with patriarchy, and it's this big mess. It's just this big mess. So that, as a short introduction, I'll leave it at that. Okay. There's a interesting thing happening as we get older. I'm 59 years old, and I would, definitely in the third part of my life as well, and that does bring up certain challenges. One of which is like, we can't, we don't have any time to waste here. All right, and we're not kids anymore. We know what we want. And sometimes, this can be an advantage, but it can also be a disadvantage. We know what we want, and there's, the story, we know what we want, but there's no one out there who can do that for us, right?
Exactly, and we don't have the time to waste to just get together with somebody and after 5 years finding out, oh, that was not the right one, no?
or even wasting an hour, on a date that, there's really...
Oh, an hour I would still admit to, people are, even if they are not interesting, there is something interesting about meeting them. So an hour is okay, but 5 years, maybe not. So, yeah. I'm just thinking about Martin's manual, which is about finding the right level of partner. What is different in authentic relating to that? What does it mean, authentic relating?
Right. Well, again, it's wonderful for me to have Martin on the call. Martin, and you're famous with your bold attempt to create a integral relating manual that covers sexuality. Hats off for that. I haven't read it, but I do look forward to engaging there. And sort of my frame around that, and I kind of want to get an impact from that from you guys as well, is integral philosophy is a model for how humans can relate at deeper and more authentic levels through an understanding of, among other things, but through an understanding of the developmental levels, and particularly the spiral dynamic levels, and how people at different levels can communicate, how people at different development, and also how people at different developmental levels can fail to communicate, right? And what I'm so excited about the authentic relating movement and the circling practice in particular is that it can be a very, very powerful way of surfacing those differences. And if I were to summarize the practice, conceptually, it's actually extremely simple. It is simply the willingness and the ability or the skill to surface what's in the relational space between two people who are communicating. All right. So typically, in a normal conversation, we do not reveal our true feelings. All right. And particularly, we don't. Let's say we're very shy or inhibited or even ashamed of admitting certain things that we want. Everyone wants connection, or most people want connection. Everyone wants affection. Everyone wants to be heard, seen, accepted, and loved. And we also want, in certain cases, sensual and romantic attention, right? But we don't speak about these things when we talk, and this creates this enormous withhold, and that really blocks deeper layers of intimacy. So the circling practice in particular, it's a very conceptually very simple, but infinitely profound way of accessing the deeper conversation that we all want. But for the most part, we're afraid, and we're also conditioned into believing that it's not appropriate. You can't say, "Could you please stop talking and listen to me now for a minute? I'm a little bit irritated." all right? Or we don't say, we don't share attraction for the most part until at least the fifth date, which is kind of crazy, right? We don't share guilt, we don't share shame, we don't share discomfort, we don't share anxiety. It's like we're pretending to be these machines, right? And this is, and this is doubly so in sexuality, because it's very tender for most people.
Yeah, and we try to figure out what the other wants us to be. And then we try to be that with what we think that the other wants us to be. But who knows, that's
Right,
also
right.
projections of strange ways.
Right. Okay, let me just say one thing, and because I said I'm talking a lot here. I'm talking a lot more than I thought I would, but I'm quite passionate about this. But I do want to need back from you guys, particularly from you, Martin. So there's an additional thing. So first of all, dating and online dating, it's an enormous business. Okay, there's 50 million people in the United States alone that have tried online dating. All right, there's a hunger there. All right. And yet most people, they're completely clueless how to do relationship in the first place because they don't have authentic relating skills. And they're doubly clueless when it comes to online dating. So it's a bit of a jungle out there. And there's this huge industry that's, well, first of all, online dating is a huge industry by itself. The services that provide these, provide the service, but also the coaching men and women how to be successful in a relationship. All right. And there's this very huge movement. You're probably aware of it. It's called pickup artist. Do you guys know about pickup artist? You should read. If you're interested in that, there's an amazing book by Neil Strauss called The Game, which is extremely entertaining. He's a wonderful writer. He talks about how he penetrated the secret society of guys who are getting together and trying to figure out how to get women to have sex with them. Okay, and I think it's sort of the whole movement has been discredited in a way. It's sort of the exact opposite of authentic relating, right? But there is generally the fantasy or the illusion that you can persuade someone to want to have sex with you, and particularly if you're a man, all right? And there's a certain reality. I call it sort of relational and relational and sexual reality. Is men and women have different sexual attraction patterns typically. All right, and so for me, the beginning of authentic dating is first of all to understand and to have the courage and the skill to speak to what's really going on, right? Which it's attractive, vulnerability is very attractive, for both sexes. All right. And the second thing is, forget the illusion that you can persuade a woman or impress her into wanting to have sex with you, and just kind of show up with her for her in whatever that, she wants.
Yeah,
which is the exact opposite of pickup artist, right?
Yeah,
and then that's sort of what I teach, and we get into it later.
Before I continue to ask or to share something, I would ask Martin to give his 5 cents here, because otherwise I do it all alone.
So, to pick up on the last thing, first of all, I wanted to appreciate for sharing authentically that you feel nervous about this conversation. And are we talking more about sexuality or online dating or relationships or authentic relating, or all the above?
I'd say everything. They all, they're all important. The fundamental question is, people, they want to connect, and they want to connect sensually. It's one of the deepest human needs, right?
Yeah. Well, I'm not sure if I would generalize it that way. I know several people for whom sensuality, like coming from the love languages, for example, physical touch maybe might be their least favorite love language. And so they have other human needs of connecting which are not sensual.
Sure.
So, and it's probably the need is differently experienced probably for men than it is for women. Maybe also how we want to be touched and where we want to be touched and when we want to be touched where. And that's often not in sync. Or, I mean, you probably understand that. We understand that, you know, to be attuned to if we are with a woman about, you know, when she want to be touched, where and how, and which is, I don't know if that's a skill you're teaching in your book, the first book you showed us, The Manual for Men. By the way, my first book is also called The Manual for Men.
We have that in common.
Which I often say it's actually a manual for me.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
It was also sort of a manual for me. I'm trying to live up to my model, to be honest with you.
Yeah. And so what you said at the end, I'm kind of like not being very linear here right now, is you said that the pickup artist method doesn't work. Is that what you were saying?
Well, it works for women who are basically immature.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't work for, you know, women who know themselves, you know, and it's also, it's a terrible way to begin a relationship because, you know, what do you do the morning after? You know,
Mm-hmm.
you built the whole relationship on a lie.
Yeah.
You know, trying to present an appearance of something that you believe is going to be attractive,
mm-hmm.
as opposed
for
to
me,
right.
For me, listen to that and hearing that, it's really, oh, I don't really like that because it looks like betrayal and like manipulation.
It is.
Because women they connect much more love with sexuality than obviously men do. And so we have different needs until we become sexual, or we become sexual automatically because we try to be like men, and then it doesn't really, it's hurting us more than doing good. So, wow, I didn't know that that's a real sort of movement doing this, teaching this. That's disgusting.
Right. No, well, it's sort of fallen into discredit, but it's
I hope so. As a woman, I would immediately say no. You know.
Well, I mean, my perspective on that is actually different. So a little different. The pickup artist techniques, you know, a lot of them I find valid and helpful for men who are insecure around how to approach women. And it's like any tool, you know, you can use to abuse and objectify women and have one-night stands, right? Like Neil Strauss describes in his book, right? That some of the pickup artists use it to keep score. How many women can they pick up in a certain time? But that's the underlying moral values. I mean, you can use a hammer to kill other people, or you can use a hammer as a practical tool to build something useful. And some or even most of the techniques I found quite helpful if they're used sincerely to approach women and to make a connection and to overcome our own fears and shame around approaching women. And I think that's what Neil Strauss also really describes, that they teach insecure men who have a deep fear of approaching women techniques, how to overcome that fear.
Right, and and that's a great point, Martin. And I would say, a guy who's so terrified of talking to a woman that he's not even going to open his mouth, which is true for many of us. Obviously, the first step is to learn how to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Right, and I also just want to reflect something you earlier said, is that people have different. People are different in their sexual and relational needs.
Mm-hmm.
And there's no formula for how to how to approach someone, or how to make them feel seen or appreciated or give them a positive experience. And these the differences that exist between people in general tend to be amplified in the area of sexuality. There's an enormous diversity of human needs to begin with,
mm-hmm.
and there's even greater range of sexual needs as well.
Mm-hmm.
which is, where all the kink, the kink and alternative sexuality practices, come across. It's kind of mind-boggling. So this is what this does is it makes it a very, very difficult territory to navigate, which is compounded by, cultural oppression in the area of sexuality, and which is sort of part of patriarchy as well.
Mm.
I'm just a little bit doing the facilitator here. Martin, you are black.
Yeah, my video is off. I don't know why.
Maybe you go out and come in again for a moment.
Well, I can probably open my laptop. Hang on a second, because it switched to my internal laptop camera, not my external camera.
Yeah, that's better. So we can see you. That's much better, because I don't like the voices which come out of the dark.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe in a very romantic moment, that would be nice.
Right.
Okay, now I need to look down here.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And I need to put on my glasses so I see what I'm doing.
Technical challenges all over the
I need
place.
to close this window and make this large. Okay, there we go. Now I'm back here.
Okay.
So yeah, so in my Integral Relationships, a manual for men, I reviewed 30 relationship books, and one of them was Neil Strauss's The Game, and I suggested to men who have insecurities, as Marc, as you said, around how to approach women. And I'm a little bit reminded of the scene in A Beautiful Mind, the movie, where he discovers, right, if we all go for the blonde, for the most attractive one, we stand a chance of all losing out, right? And that's one of the pickup artist techniques, is not necessarily always go for the most attractive woman, but to kind of, in their technique, to ignore her, and that then makes her curious about you. So I found that parallel kind of interesting. Okay, let's move on from.
Okay, yeah. I would like to ask, you were talking about authentic dating. You have told us a little bit about the authentic movement and about creating this connection. But how do you arrive to have the first date? You said, yeah, there are dating websites, but you wouldn't date 100, 200 people, So how do you choose people? How do you intuit that might be worthwhile? You said at the beginning, Marc, that we don't have time anymore in our age. So how do you begin to establish a dating meeting?
Right. Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. I mean, it's not that we don't have time, Heidi. It's more like we don't have time to waste. That's that sort of thing. I mean, nobody has time to waste, but particularly when once you have a certain clarity, and this is the very, very, I mean, this is a tricky thing, but because there's tremendous opportunity. I mean, you go online, there's so many people there, right? And you have to, you do have to invest a certain amount of time in figuring out the ones who are going to be a match for you, right? You have to read the profiles, you have to respond intelligently, you have to give some kind of reflection of what it is in their profile that attracts you, and you have to make an offer. So
and then also how to write your profile when you want to be.
Precisely. And that, again, it's a tricky question, because you have to decide, how much vulnerability you actually want to express, and also ideally you would, in your profile, you would speak to, like if you're a guy and you're running a profile, you would attempt to speak to women's emotional and relational and sexual reality, right? Which typically is going to be different from men's relational and sexual reality, typically, right? And, and we get into the whole question of sexual polarity, which is just a whole other conversation. I'm a student of David Data. He's usually inspired me. I think that there's a lot of things that he doesn't get, but fundamentally it's pretty solid information if you don't take it as gospel about how to connect with the opposite sex and how to create, essentially, deep transformative relational and sexual connections. And I've sort of I'm sure you've reviewed data among your 30, Martin, and I'm sure you have opinions about that. And, you know, we could spend like 2 hours talking to you and me, I suspect, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. So anyway, you know, the topic of dating, I mean, essentially it's a, you know, 3 or 4 step process. And this is what I teach in my courses, by the way. It's sort of a work in progress. A lot of this is evolved out of, you know, my own experiences in online dating. But, you know, first of all, you want to present yourself as, in a way that's attractive to the opposite sex. You want to, that's step 1. Number 2, you want to, you have to filter through the profiles and find the ones that you think are a match for you and respond to them. And number 3, you actually have to meet them to, you know, to see what there is, because often it's very difficult to tell online. And I strongly recommend that you do first dates via video chat. Also, it's sort of the core, not practice, but the core strategy that you know, that I suggest for men and women is you know, don't spend 2 hours and money on a dinner date. You know, that's going to be some awful experience. You know, just, you know, get with him for 15 minutes. If you can't establish a connection in a 15-minute video chat, it's probably not worth your time. And, you know, but, you know, a lot of women resist video chats for, you know, for various reasons. So it requires certain, you know, I hate to use the word strategy, because any approach to relationship that is primarily based on strategy rather than presence or connection is going to be limited, and it will work sometimes and be disastrous at other times. But nonetheless, you know, it can be valuable to really have a model strategy for how you're going to, you know, how you're going to approach this whole theme. You know, there's you know, so many people attempt online dating and sometimes go in with great enthusiasm and, you know, basically burn out. You know, I'd say 90% of people burn out on online dating, or else they just put their profiles up and they leave them there for years and don't do anything, which is the same thing essentially.
That's me.
Yeah, I wanted to say strategy it's nothing bad, because before you had the strategy to answer, to write letters and whatever, and now you have the possibility, thanks to technology, to see each other. And I have the experience, I'm talking with many people online on video, and I know them only from video, many of them. And then when I meet them in person, that's as if I knew them forever. So that's really a good way of creating a relationship. And when I met Marc, we met only writing on Facebook, and then we met via Skype, and then he decided to come over to Italy, and we see if we come together. Otherwise, it's too risky, you know, not just because in the words, when you read the text, you can interpret a lot of stuff into the text, your own fantasy. But if you see the other person in, how do we say, in flesh and blood, in
the flesh.
Yeah, in the flesh, then, you know, at least a certain impression you have. They can still be actors and everything, you know, but also the feeling. I have found out that V-spaces, we were talking about V-spaces, you can create them also online in a certain sense, because this emanation, the sensing quality is there when you see the other person into the face. So
yeah, precisely. I mean, there's so much more depth right here in this room than if we were talking on the phone.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
I can see your face. I can see your background, your flowers. You know, Martin. I can really get more of so much more of a sense of you.
Yeah.
Than if we were on the phone.
And we would be stupid in the case of dating, which is to find a partner for a long time, not to use these means which we have today and just fall into the pit somehow.
Yeah,
no?
You're not going to be making love over the telephone.
No, not on the video either, but you're a little bit nearer.
So I wanted to ask, why do you have the experience that women do not want to, or some women do not want to do online chats? And
Well,
And how do you overcome? Do you then still go on a date, or is that a deal breaker for you? That's two questions.
yeah, it's a good question, Martin. And the answer is it depends. But I think part of the reason many women don't want to do video testing. And by the way, this is split. There's a lot of women are like very enthusiastic about this, like Heidi, for instance, very enthusiastic. People who probably the biggest reason is people just are not aware of the technology. And I find this kind of shocking that in the 21st century, people don't video chat, or at least they just video chat with their children, right? They just don't realize the potential of this medium and the benefits to be gained, which is essentially saving their time and money, right? And the ability to get into deep connection spaces quite rapidly, potentially. And I think the other thing is I think women are afraid of being judged, and they feel insecure over their appearance. It's part of their social conditioning, and they feel safer behind a telephone, perhaps, right? I'm sorry, there's a little bit of background noise. I'll mute when I'm not talking. There's also trust issues. I mean, I'm sure some of them are afraid that you're going to secretly videotape them and publish it on Facebook. There's all kinds of. It's a what's the word? It's a forest of thorns of dating, and particularly in the early stages before there's any kind of trust. For someone that you met for 5 minutes, and people don't know how to navigate that situation. And doubly so if they don't have any kind of foundation in authentic relating, right?
But do you think this is especially for women? I know some men who technically are not really very able to do these things, and they get frightened when they have to do that. So I don't think it's only women.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. And I know a lot from the male perspective, and I'm trying to enlarge this. This also appreciate that feedback, Heidi. Right.
So Heidi, you said, I don't know if you were speaking for yourself or in general, that you were saying kind of like we all try to find like a long-term relationship, right? When we're dating.
Both. I think everybody wants to have a long-term relationship. At least I think so, because it's too much bother. The short-time relationships, that's too much.
Because that's not at all my experience.
No.
In California.
Yeah, California, these are crazy people,
So I found that some, I only date women, so I can only speak from that. But from the men, I know that's sometimes the case too, that some people are still heartbroken and they just want to get out and meet some other people to kind of soothe themselves. So they're not even looking for someone, they just look for company. And even in Turkey, I met a few women here who were heartbroken and just wanted to hang out with me, kind of like to get relationship advice and to have someone listen to their breakup stories, right? Find new people that they can tell their story. And I've done that too. I mean, I'm been guilty of that too. Then I don't know how widespread it is, but in California, I experienced that it's a free meal, for people, because they expect typically the man to entertain and to pay for the date. And so literally women just went like, yeah, take me out to dinner. Why not?
Well, okay. Maybe I'm too old for that it comes into my mind that should be the normal. As far as I know, in my surrounding and with people, also younger people I have talked, they have in their mind not short-term dates or something, but relationships where they can rely on each other. Must not necessarily be sexual. If it's sexual, it's good, but at least women. But they want to have good friendships, good people to be together, and where you don't have to work so hard every time to to meet, but that they are there, and you can approach them. When I hear dating, I think about that. I didn't think about this short. Yeah, I've heard about speed dating and stuff like this, but it's not really in my awareness. So also because was in a long-term relationship, and I'm now waking up that I'm not anymore, and then oops, you know.
And a third group, and that's even promoted in some dating advice book for women, is really to play the quantity game, right? The elimination game, and to also assess their own value. So like, let's see, how rich, how powerful, how good looking a man I can still attract, right? And that, as I said, that there are books that advise go at least on 100 dates before you even decide to seriously consider a guy, just to see what's out there, who you can attract, what's available.
That sounds like supermarket.
Yeah, well, but that's what I learned at Harvard Business School about attracting a great guy. It's that total rational approach of.
Wow.
And
is that authentic relating, Marc?
Well, I mean,
the question is for me or to Marc is, how do you avoid going on dates with these types of women? And I'm not saying they're doing anything wrong. I'm just saying if I have a different agenda or a different goal, I don't want to be a guinea pig or paying for dinner or hearing their breakup stories if I'm really looking for an available partner who's interested in a long-term relationship. And I would say 20% of people who date online are interested in that. The other 80% are not.
Yeah, exactly, Martin. And I think this is exactly accurate. And the first, I apologize for the noise in the background, but hopefully you can still hear me. There's actually a minority of people who are interested in what I call depth relationship. Or authentic relating, and they're I think you have to figure out how to filter them, and I think you have to be kind of ruthless as well, whether you're a man or a woman, right?
Mm-hmm. If you're in the other 20% category,
if you're really looking for a conscious relationship, I think it's probably at most 20% of people in the world who are capable of attempting that and or have a clue what that means. And this creates a huge problem for people who are interested in conscious relationship. And in response to you, Heidi, it could be, people may want a committed partner, or I call it a woman to grow old with, right? I'd love to find a woman to grow old with, but I'd also be quite happy to find kind of a stable, nurturing, exciting connection that would lead to some kind of manifestation in the world. And what I'm looking for is primarily someone who will stand beside me and that I can create with. And I had that in my first marriage as well. There was we were very, very, very good co-creators. So, I mean, I have a curiosity, Martin, what's going on for you and in your dating life. And I mean, it seems like you have, quite a bit of experience here.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. What, how's that gone for you? And how are you? Yeah, I guess the challenge is, we're both, I call myself a philosopher of love and sex. Mm-hmm. And the challenge there is trying to, the challenge for me is living my own model. My model is basically men in support and service to women, which I think is, from my perspective, it's probably the most powerful way to approach relationships as a man. Just mm-hmm. offer yourself in service.
Yeah.
Right.
I think for me, my little story is that until I was, I forgot how it was, 50 or so, I only had, up to that point, intercourse with two women, and I had then married them both. So when my second marriage ended, I was basically clueless about how to pick up women or to date women. I just hoped that I would get lucky again and would marry that woman and then live happily ever after. So that's where I came from not having these teenage experiences and in my first 2/3 parts of my life. And so first of all, it was just like the curiosity. How do you get from first eye contact to intercourse? And, it turned out that it became much easier in that new environment that I was in to get women to connect with me and to sleep with me and to pursue relationships with me. But I was completely clueless about how to have a deeper relationship that's not in the traditional gender roles that I knew up to that point. So that was my first phase of learning and experience, and of course got my heart terribly broken, broke some other women's hearts. It was just a real mess. And the second phase was then really how do we find a compatible partner, and what values and desires and goals and do we have to share. And that led me obviously to, or not obviously, led me to Ken Wilbersberg, and then to use the integral map to say you want to be at least at the same level of consciousness development, sexual development, spiritual development, and animus complex development. And then also, met Decker Kunov when he was still in the pickup artist scene in San Francisco, by the way. He started out as a pickup artist and with his partner. And then, pursuing more healing, more growth, more authentic relating. That was sort of like the second phase, right? That the people in the authentic relating, the V-Space community are in. And so that was also relatively easy to find women who were interested in that. But I, for me, found these relationships still unsustainable, as some others found them too. And so my third phase, which is then in my second book, which is slightly thicker than the first one, called Sex, Purpose, Love, is that I was thriving in that. What is my real authentic purpose, which was inspired initially by Andrew Cohen, by authentic, what does he call it? Evolutionary enlightenment, right? And what he calls authentic life purpose, and then later by purpose guides. And now I'm basically only interested in someone who would share my unique, authentic, what I call transcendental purpose, which limits, of course, the field quite a bit, but it's also easier to identify that person or to say who's not that person. So it's not about, can I have an authentic, deeply, emotional, whatever, growth-oriented relationship with a person, or can I have a lovership or a sexual partner, but really sharing that purpose. And I interviewed a couple a few months ago who are in Southern California and independently of me teach exactly that same thing. Instead of kind of looking for a partner, live your authentic purpose and show up in the world, authentically expressing and manifesting your purpose, and you will more or less automatically bump into someone who has the same purpose, and that becomes an attractor. And then I met a couple in Germany. They just invited me to their course, and they're teaching exactly the same thing without having heard of me or the other couple in California. And last night I had dinner with a couple in Turkey here. They came to one of my meetups here, and they're into ecological building and design. And I asked them how they met, and sure enough, they met at a school in Sweden, which teaches ecological design. And so I think that's a new emergence in the dating world, right? That people are looking, for sex and company and money and things in the first level. At the second level, they're looking for deeper, authentic relating, what you are teaching. And on the third level of this emergence of sexual selection, selecting a partner, I think we're now moving worldwide on the edge of evolution into shared purpose. And that's where I am. So that's my story, from being completely insecure around women to figuring out how I can get sex and company, figuring out how I can more authentically, deeply relate with women and heal and grow and learn and awaken in the context of a relationship, to sharing a transcendental purpose.
Yeah, Martin, that's very powerful. I mean, I'd love to get a resource list from you. Have you written about in your last book? Can you show me the book again? Sex, Love,
Sure.
Purpose.
Sex, Purpose, Love.
Sex, Purpose, Love. Right.
And even the subtitle, that couple in Germany has the same subtitle in German. You know, couples with a shared purpose, creating a better world. So,
yeah. You know, this is. I mean, what you're doing is sort of you're articulating, you know, precisely my ideas at a different at a different level, and I appreciate that. For you know, and I'd love to hear, you know, get links to some of these couples that are teaching this material, because if it does seem like a new emergence that everybody is discovering and teaching this independently, that, you know, that's pretty powerful.
Yeah. Well, I know two couples who teach that independently, one in Germany, one in California. Actually, they moved to Hawaii now.
Okay, can you share who they are, just for people's interest?
Sure, I would have to look it up on my website. I don't.
Okay, all right, okay.
Martin, you can send it to me, and I put it on the event page. And
yeah,
so
happy to do that.
Yeah.
And I have a video on YouTube where I had a conversation with them for an hour. It was very, very moving.
Yeah, I'd love to watch that. That would be.
And so there is, of course, couples for many years. Like I'm friends with Alex and Alison Gray, for example. Right, when they heard about my work, they were like, "Wow, this guy teaches and writes about exactly what we're living." And so there's probably thousands or 100,000 of these couples. But it hasn't emerged to the level that people make that sort of like their dating strategy, because it's complicated, because most people do not know what their authentic purpose or their transcendental purpose is. So when I'm on Tinder, or when I was still kind of dating and had more time for that, I had like the simple question, what do you feel most passionate and concerned about? What is your life's purpose? And what attracted you to my profile? These were the three questions I asked up front. And that filters out 99% of all people.
Yeah.
Which is good.
Which is a good thing, yeah, because it still leaves millions of potential partners if you filter out 99%, right?
Right. Yeah.
I'm just thinking about the situation of the woman. I have still the idea that for women it's more important the age. Men look for age more than for the other things. At least that's my impression. And for beauty, for you know, when you are 30 or 20, you are not. When you are 60, you are looking a little bit different. So this I see a little bit as let's say a shame point for us who are a little bit more elder. So often, only lately, I heard the story of a man who is a little over 60 and has exchanged his partner with a half as old, you know. And also seeing our beloved Ken, he doesn't have a partner in his age. He has always this young woman. So that's, I don't know if this is, if you really can expect when you are 60 and have a 30-year-old partner, if you can expect how do you say, peer-to-peer relationship. 30 years of life experience is just, it's different. It creates a gap.
Mainly stage one relationships, right? Where it's about company, about sex, about feeling good about yourself. The younger woman has a high status male, right? That they can learn from and feel safe with. He's more experienced. So they get that out of the relationship, and the guy gets increased testosterone levels, right? It makes him feel more alive, more inspired. I mean, Michael Beckwith just divorced Ricky Byers Beckwith to be with his yoga teacher, right? So, I mean, it's...
that's something I just cannot approve with men. I'm sorry. I don't think that's the right thing. That's like...
But if you, Heidi, if you had this with Marc, right? And there's another couple here who I just did interviews with. Her name is Bilor Kalkavan. She's sort of like a older Paris Hilton in Turkey. Everybody knows her. And she has a boyfriend who's 20 years younger, but they share a purpose. They're both into, you know, astrology and personal growth and spirituality. And so I think when we focus on stage 3 of shared purpose, then beauty and age and all these other things get overridden by this strong attractor of sharing your life's purpose.
Yeah.
Because once you fulfilled your biological purpose, right? In my book, I divide between our biological purpose, which is to survive, expressing our sexuality, group forming, territorialism, competition, and cooperation, and quality of life seeking. These are it's called the biological imperative that we share with all living beings. And that's what, Marc, you referred to earlier, right? We all want to have sex, right? Be sexual. We have safety. And we also all seek a form of quality of life. And as long as that is hedonistic, right, avoiding pain, seeking pleasure, we look for certain partners that allow us to fulfill our biological purpose more effectively. And then, of course, men want younger women. That's in our DNA because they have better reproductive capabilities than older women. But we're also not eating fat and sugar all the time, even though it's in our DNA to do that. We can override these impulses. And the motivator for overriding them is in the second level, that we want to learn, heal, grow, and awaken in a partnership. And at the third level, it is to share a purpose. And when we get to the third level, all these other primary attractors become secondary. So I wouldn't really care if I'm with the same age or older or younger woman, as long as she would authentically share my purpose and co-create with me.
I do understand that, and that's the same thing with me. I think I'm sort of in a victimized place then, thinking, oh, where are these men? Mm-hmm. The ones who are there, like in the case of Marc, die. Oh, so yeah. Always less there to pick from, let's say. Mm-hmm. That's why this is a little bit my own, let's say, fear.
Yeah. But can you clearly state what your authentic transcendental purpose is in life?
I would say I do. Yeah, I can talk around it a little bit, Mm-hmm. It has to do with helping others. That is a very feminine way of being. But in growing up and becoming more aware, becoming more truthful, becoming more authentic, as we were talking about authenticity, mm-hmm. and override all these, let's say, requirements of fashions and the newest, this and the newest that. That doesn't mean that you need to neglect yourself, but not to jump on everything. For instance, when I look in Pixabay, which I use for getting pictures for my websites, and I give in women, I normally get high-heeled shoes, mm-hmm. and things like that. And if this is what is characterizing women, I don't think that's the right thing. Or with men, or lately women as fighters and men as, this green meme idea that men should be, weak and things like that.
Yeah. Walk behind the woman.
Exactly. And all these, whatever kind of preconception that is, I want to not fight against it, but come to more clarity, what is really so for you, and what is your own conditioning which you are responding to, or do you act and think and believe or whatever authentically because it's yours, or if you are repeating other people's thoughts. What is about with you, Marc?
Well, I'm sort of enjoying your dialogue, and just this is a very, very complex topic, and I think we could talk for 10 hours and really just brush the surface of it. But because there's so many, sexuality has so many drivers, and there's definitely the evolutionary biology aspect of it, that men are attracted to fertility for genetic reasons. We're sort of programmed into that. But as Martin says, it's not the only thing we're attracted to. And I think and then there's this other whole layer that patriarchy puts on us. in terms of, shall I say, patriarchy is essentially, it's a power structure that really benefits 10% of the population at most, right? And it's particularly active in sexuality. So patriarchy is sort of an overlay of the evolutionary biological imperative of men to find the most fertile women and of women to find the most powerful men, right? That's what our genetic coding is in sexuality. And, if I may give you some advice, Heidi, may I? Yeah. It's not going to serve you or anyone to disagree with the genetic sexual reality. And at the same time, I think you have much more power in the situation than you realize. And I would say the same is true for men, because men are also very much in despair around this. They're trying to find women who are open, who are kind, who are generous, who are sexual, and they a lot of us, we can't. We find the women fearful, shut down, traumatized. So both sexes have their work to do around this. And,
yeah, absolutely. The work to do around us. And I think, and I have had the experience to work together in these things, that's really very powerful in the couple, Instead, yeah, you can do your work alone and you should do your work alone, but then coming together in a couple, which is sort of the game setting, more complete setting, where you can try that out and see how far have you got.
And I'm hugely inspired, by the fact that this conversation is happening. That we're having this conversation. So all the people that Martin's discovering are having this conversation. Because it's a source of a great deal of pain for a lot of people, including me in the past, and to some degree even now. But not 10% of what it used to be. Mm. When I realized. When I realized that this is not just my problem, right? Yeah. And when I realized that, being in my purpose is central. And without that, you can't really have success in a relationship if you're not aware of your purpose, right?
So how would you define what your purpose is, your life's purpose, Marc?
I see myself as a relational leader. I'm a development evolving relational leader, and I think I have a particular interest in the area of sexuality, mm-hmm. right? And I'm a writer as well. Mm-hmm. I'm a philosopher of love and sex, and I'm still I'm still single. I'm still looking, but this is far less painful to me than it was before, because once I got some of these lessons, it really just completely changed my self-perception, my self-worth. Mm-hmm. And I was coming less from a position of need and more from a position of offer or strength or power. Okay. Mm-hmm. And this is the thing I will say for both sexes, actually, my advice to both sexes. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it seems, Martin, and this is very similar to what you're saying as well. Find your purpose. Mm-hmm. And see who you can attract from that level, and don't be overly afraid of rejection, mm-hmm. right? And understand the numbers. It's a numbers game. Ultimately, you have to increase the flow of people through your life if you're going to be successful. And this is where this is my challenge, to actually go on dates, sort of read the profiles and respond, and to put in the time. It's not going to happen by magic. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
No, for me it happened by magic. So I think next time it should be something like that too. But mm-hmm. Let's ask Martin, what is your transcendental purpose?
Well, to support singles and couples in co-creating healthy relationships that make the world a better place.
Yeah, so we have all three of us have something like that, no? To facilitate the growth, our own, that of other people, and the world. Yeah.
But throughout my life, I had sort of like this knack for bringing people together to co-create. So first as a musician, I was the one who picked the band members and so like had a sense of who, not only musically, but also from their character fit together. And then I had a big music store, right? And we had 80,000 customers. So it was kind of like connecting people with technology that they could be creative with. And now then I started the Power of Now group for 5 years and brought people together that way. Now in Turkey, we have a few meetups every week where people come together. And that then kind of got narrowed down to really show people how they or support people in co-creating healthy relationships, which then it developed obviously, or not so obviously, over the last few years, as I said, from just finding someone, right, to finding someone you can heal, learn, grow, and awaken with, and to the next level of finding or attracting someone that you share your transcendental purpose with, and also how to find out what your transcendental purpose is. So that got added onto because that's obviously the prerequisite, that you know what your purpose is. And how I experience that now is that I'm not even looking any longer. For me, my life is completely filled in living my purpose. And if nobody shows up who wants to share or can share it with me, then I still feel I have fulfilled my life's purpose. I mean, I also procreated. I have 4 daughters, so I lived my biological purpose, which a lot of other people, at least, they left out the procreation part. And so that's basically my dating strategy now, is not to look for someone, but to live my transcendental purposes authentically and as forcefully and as rigorously and authentically as I can. And that sometimes attracts women, but they maybe think that their purpose is to support me in my purpose, and I learned the hard way that does not work. So that's the little tricky part around that. For some males, that women are just generally attracted to their purpose, even though it's not their own authentic purpose. Does that make sense?
Yes, and we have been trained for hundreds of years to support the men in their purpose.
Right.
It's quite, we are still looking for how to do that and be accepted when we have our own purpose. Because normally, still today, women support their husbands, but hardly ever husbands support their wives and their professional career, Normally,
I mean, that's the idea, sorry for interrupting you, which men do. They interrupt women all the time, and women don't interrupt men. I just wanted to say, right, there's the idea, I want to find someone who supports me in my purpose, and the woman says, I want to find someone who supports me in her purpose, right? So, but what I'm talking about is that they have a shared purpose. That's different.
Yeah. Then it's more easy to come together.
And then you have power with and not power over, right? The relationship shifts from the patriarchy to equality, but not into sameness, as David Data would say, right? You still bring very different qualities to the relationship, how you express your purpose, which then creates the attraction.
And you co-create.
And then you co-create, and you create synergy, right? Where the whole is bigger than the sum of the parts. And that is more attractive in at least at my age or in the last 5 years for me than sexual attraction. It overrides basically the primary fantasies around age and looks and power and status and all these things, because you realize you become powerful together and not having these power games of siphoning off the other person's worldly power and sexual power in these things.
That makes complete sense.
Quite fascinating.
Yeah.
And I think it goes beyond the authentic relating and we-space things, because if you look at the quadrants, authentic relating and what Patricia Albert, who's a good friend of mine, teaches, right, it's very focused on the left-hand quadrants and often somewhat ignores or diminishes the right-hand quadrants, or at least doesn't include
Right.
the right-hand quadrant, speaking integrally.
Well, I mean, you're probably right, Martin, and I definitely need to explore your work a little more. But just let me give you just a couple of reflections. First of all, you're perhaps a little bit more evolved than I am in terms of the overriding of sexual desire and sexual attraction purpose by sexual attraction by global purpose and so forth. Which is fine. I think of authentic relating as not necessarily an end in itself, but as a tool to surface what's happening. And until people are able to live that out, they're not going to get to the awareness of
absolutely.
So
yeah,
right.
Totally agree. I love the authentic relating work. I went to the groups in LA there.
Well, that's actually very strong in Europe. There's one of the biggest schools of circling. Actually, the biggest school of circling is in Amsterdam. It's called the Circling Institute. Sorry, not. It's called Circling Europe. Excuse me, Circling Europe.
Yeah,
it's in Amsterdam.
Yeah, there's a group in Switzerland where a good friend of mine is a part of, who met his partner. He's from Santa Rosa, actually, and he met his partner on Integral Singles, which is the Integral dating website that I'm running.
Sweet.
And it's like a funny story that I knew Aria in Switzerland fairly well, and Kirk was a good friend in Santa Rosa. I would have never dreamt, right, that they would become a couple, and they met on Integral Singles. And so
that's wonderful. So,
little plug for my little dating website.
Yeah, we had a little bit neglected Marc, who should have been the main interview.
No, I wanted a conversation, Heidi. I just want to say before we wrap up, it seems this is probably a good pausing point. I enjoyed very much being with you both, and I look forward to sort of the follow up. I didn't know that Couples on Purpose was almost like a global movement, Martin. So that's very good for me to hear as well. It sounds very aligned with what I do. And, I do offer courses on dating. I do the men's side, and I have partners who are doing the women's side, and we come together and we go on trial dates. And, we'll probably be starting up again in May. And the website is authentic.singles. Authentic.singles. You can find out more about the programs and see various articles and resources there.
Cool.
Wonderful.
Maybe I become a client when I go back to America, because dating in Turkey is basically not possible because of the language and cultural differences.
Got it.
And also, I don't want to get an image here of being here to take advantage of unassuming Turkish women. So that's a no-no for me right now here.
Okay, so we have to go all to California to be in a culture which is supporting that, So
no, I think there's a weight culture everywhere. I mean, Germany is actually very advanced in sexuality.
Germany may be, but Germany is far away from where I am, and so as long as I cannot sell my house here, I won't be able to go anywhere. So then maybe I come to California. Who knows?
Yeah.
Anyway, it was very interesting to talk with you, men. I learned again a little more about men. That's good, because up to when I met Marc, I had many ideas about men. I met a lot of men in my life, and I grew with my relationships. But the authentic part, what a man really is, only Marc showed it to me. So. What is underneath the surface, let's say. So with you talking, I got a little bit more insight on that, because thanks for being so free in talking about your inner desires and the Constitution. That's really fine. And I think we should do more of these conversations.
Yes.
To create a better understanding between men and women.
Totally,
I feel
absolutely.
this is the basis of peace on earth, when we, between the genders, get peace. And not only peace to not say anything, but really understanding, And when we can do that in the couples, then I think we can also do it as politicians or whatever. But as long as at home you can do it, how can you create peace in the world, you know. And
It's so yeah, it's so funny you mentioning that, Heidi, because this is precisely my philosophy too, and it's actually the sort of the most famous exponent of this philosophy is a German. He's called Dieter Dohm, D-U-H-M. Are you familiar with Dieter Dohm?
No.
No.
Yeah, no. Well, he's part of the Zen community, Z-E-G-G. It's sort of an East German.
Yeah.
He was one of the co-founders of that. He moved to Portugal, where he runs an eco village called Tamera as well.
I heard that. Yeah.
Yeah. So he's getting old, but he wrote a book called Eros Unredeemed. I think it's 1972, so it's a very old book. And he was sort of active and famous in the in the German communist movement. And he ultimately decided that political struggle was completely pointless until we actually addressed the problem of men and women.
Exactly. And I hope for the audience we have done a little bit today, and I think we should meet more often and even invite other people for panel discussions on that, because this could really be inspiration for people not to shy away, but to become more curious of each other and how we can come together. So I thank you really very, 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 very much, and connect with these two guys, for their courses. Connect with us, like us on Facebook, and subscribe to the YouTube channel, and come back for all the other wonderful conversations we have. It's not only about relationships. There are many other topics, all integrally informed, I would say. Although we don't often speak about integral theory, but we invite people who are sort of already embodying it. Most of them do. And so you will hear something different in these conversations than you normally hear. So thank you. See you next week. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you all.